Chapter 1. The Harsh Return.
You're absolutely useless. A high school graduate in her 50s? What a waste of company resources. We don't need people like you here.
These harsh words came from my younger manager when I returned to work after a 5-year hiatus caring for my mother. The CEO, instead of defending me, sided with the manager and gave me a pointed look.
The manager has a point. Why don't you seriously consider your future here? I'm sure you could find another job if you tried hard enough.
It was a thinly veiled suggestion to resign. After all I'd done for this company, there was no place for me here anymore. I understand. Thank you for everything up until now, I managed to say without my voice shaking. As I left with my head bowed, I overheard their conversation.
Well done, boss. Let's go out and celebrate getting rid of that nuisance. It's on you.
Fine. They'll be the ones in trouble when I'm gone. I left the company harboring a secret they knew nothing about. My name is Susan Miller, and I'm 52 years old. To be fired like this from a company I dedicated years to, and just after returning from leave, no less. I had taken time off to care for my mother, who raised me single-handedly. She collapsed suddenly, and the doctors gave her only a few years. Her time was limited, and I wanted to be by her side. Chapter 2. A Journey Through Memories. As I walked out of the office building for what I knew would be the last time, memories of my life flooded my mind. The weight of my dismissal pressed heavily on my shoulders, but it was nothing compared to the weight of the years I'd spent caring for my mother. My husband, Tom, had been understanding from the start. I remember the day I told him about my mother's condition, my voice trembling as I spoke. Tom, Mom, she's not well. The doctors say she only has a few years left. He had taken my hands in his eyes full of concern.
Susan, what do you need? What can we do?
I took a deep breath. I want to take leave from work. I need to be with her, Tom. She raised me alone and now...
Say no more,
he said, pulling me into a hug.
You should be with her. We'll make it work.
Tom knew how much I loved my mom and encouraged me to take leave to care for her. His support had been unwavering throughout these 5 challenging years. One day, while she was in the hospital for a test, I noticed her clutching a small drawstring bag.
This brings back memories,
she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I recognized the bag immediately. It was the one I had made by upcycling an old dress. She had kept it all this time, a testament to her sentimental nature and her love for me. Mom, I can't believe you still have that, I said, feeling a lump form in my throat. She smiled weakly.
Of course I do, sweetie. It reminds me of all the wonderful things you've made over the years.
Even after her collapse, when she became quieter, her memories remained intact. We spent hours reminiscing about our life together, just the two of us, surviving on her part-time job income. I remembered our simple meals and modest living arrangements. Despite our limited means, Mom always found ways to enrich our lives. Do you remember that summer when we couldn't afford to go on vacation? I asked her one afternoon as sunlight streamed through the hospital window. She nodded, a fond smile playing on her lips.
We turned our living room into a campsite, blanket tents and all.
I laughed at the memory. And you made s'mores in the microwave.
They weren't quite the same, were they?
She chuckled. No, but they were perfect, I assured her, squeezing her hand gently. Mom always had a knack for making something out of nothing. Handmade clothes, a desk lamp crafted from an empty box, small vegetables growing in planters made from recycled bottles. Our home was a testament to her creativity and resourcefulness. I loved helping her with these projects. We cherished everything we had, restoring and repurposing items around the house. It was during these moments that I realized my creativity and dexterity were inherited from her. Chapter 3. The Path to Independence. As I grew older, I yearned for a more comfortable life, financial stability, the ability to treat mom to something nice occasionally. So, after graduating high school, I immediately started job hunting. I went to many interviews, but finding a company willing to hire a high school graduate proved challenging. 1 year passed, then 2, time slipping away like sand through an hourglass. As I grew anxious, Mom remained supportive. I remember sitting at our small kitchen table one evening, tears of frustration in my eyes. "I don't understand, Mom," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I've been to so many interviews. Why won't anyone hire me?" She reached across the table and took my hand. "Susan, listen to me. I couldn't give you much, but I want you to find a job you truly love. Besides, I enjoy living with you. So take your time and do your best." Her words were a balm to my wounded spirit. She continued her part-time work, preparing our daily meals, never once complaining about the extended time it was taking me to find employment. Then one day, a letter arrived that filled me with joy. "Mom, look! I got hired!" I exclaimed, bursting into the living room where she was mending one of her old dresses. I showed her the acceptance notice from a company that developed and produced kitchenware and household goods. We hugged each other, overjoyed at this turn of events. "I'm so proud of you, Susan," she said, her eyes glistening with happy tears. "I always knew you could do it." I started an administrative role, diligently learning the company's operations. My approach of constantly seeking ways to improve my work caught attention, and I was promoted to the product development department, an unusual move for a high school graduate. I was surrounded by smart people from engineering schools and universities, and I was the only woman. Every day was tense, and things didn't always go smoothly. I felt like a burden, met with cold attitudes and irritation when I asked questions. The men in the department often spoke over me in meetings or took credit for my ideas. It was a challenging environment, to say the least. But the previous CEO, Mr. Johnson, was kind to me. I remember one particularly difficult day when I was ready to quit. I had made a mistake in a product design, and my colleagues had been ruthless in their criticism. I was in the break room trying to hold back tears when Mr. Johnson walked in.
"Susan, are you all right?"
He asked, genuine concern in his voice. I quickly wiped my eyes. "Yes, sir, I'm fine." He sat down across from me.
"You know, when I first started in this industry, I made plenty of mistakes. It's part of the learning process."
I looked at him, surprised by his admission. He continued.
"Take it slow. Learn one thing at a time. There's no need to rush."
His words reminded me of my mother's. Take your time and do your best. I felt some of the pressure lift. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson," I said, feeling a renewed determination.
"You have potential, Susan. Don't let anyone make you doubt that,"
he said with a kind smile before leaving. Gradually, I learned the basics of product development, combining it with my natural inclination for innovation. As I started producing results, the attitudes around me slowly changed. When my first project was approved, I finally felt like a true team member. The same colleagues who had once dismissed me now sought my input on their projects. From then on, I loved my job. I was doing what I enjoyed and could help my mother live more comfortably. I even met a wonderful man and got married. Tom was different from the men I worked with. He valued my intelligence and creativity, always encouraging me to pursue my ideas. Though we couldn't have children, my husband and I lived happily together. While I never received an official title, my work consistently produced good results. I was happy. I thought these peaceful days would continue forever. But then, Chapter 4. The Call That Changed Everything. One winter, when I was 47, I received a call from an unknown number. I was at work, putting the finishing touches on a new design for a space-saving kitchen organizer.
Hello? Is this Susan Miller?
A formal voice asked when I answered. Yes, this is she, I replied, a sense of unease creeping over me.
This is Mercy Hospital. We're calling about your mother.
My heart seemed to stop for a moment. What happened? Is she all right?
She's been admitted to the hospital. The doctors would like to speak with you in person. Can you come in?
The rest of the conversation was a blur. I remember hanging up the phone with shaking hands and immediately going to my supervisor to request emergency leave. When I arrived at the hospital, I found my mother lying in bed, looking frail and small among the white sheets and beeping machines. The doctors had given her a few years, but she lived longer than expected. It was as if she was savoring every moment, reluctant to say goodbye. Over the next 5 years, I dedicated myself to caring for her. Every day was a mixture of joy and sorrow. Joy in the moments we shared, sorrow in knowing our time was limited. She always listened to my stories with a smile, even on days when she was too weak to speak much herself. I told her about my work, about Tom, about the little things in life that brought me happiness. You know, Mom, I said one afternoon, as I sat by her bedside holding her hand, I never thanked you properly for everything you did for me. She squeezed my hand weakly. You didn't have to, sweetheart. Seeing you happy and successful is all the thanks I need. Tears welled up in my eyes. But I want to say it. Thank you, Mom, for raising me, for supporting me, for teaching me to be creative and resourceful. I wouldn't be who I am without you. She smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. And I wouldn't be who I am without you, Susan. You've given my life purpose and joy. We sat in comfortable silence after that, both of us lost in memories of the life we had shared. In her final days, she drifted in and out of consciousness. But even then, she would sometimes surprise me with moments of lucidity. One evening, as I was adjusting her blankets, she suddenly gripped my hand with unexpected strength. Susan, she said, her voice clearer than it had been in weeks. Promise me something. Anything, Mom, I replied, leaning in close. Promise me you'll always stay true to yourself. Don't let anyone dim your light. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. She smiled, seeming satisfied, and drifted back to sleep. Those were the last coherent words she spoke to me. A week later, she passed away peacefully in her sleep. I was holding her hand when she took her last breath, whispering words of love and gratitude. The loss was devastating. Even with Tom's unwavering support, I felt adrift without her. But I held on to her final words, determined to honor her memory by living as she had taught me, with creativity, resourcefulness, and kindness. By the time I returned to work after caring for her until the end, 5 years had passed. I was nervous about going back, but I was also excited to immerse myself in the work I loved once again. Little did I know that everything was about to change. Chapter 5: A Changed Landscape. The company had been acquired by a larger corporation, and it was no longer the place I knew. The kind CEO I remembered, Mr. Johnson, was gone, replaced by a younger, more aggressive leader focused solely on the bottom line. When I arrived at the product development department, only the space remained familiar. I didn't recognize any of the people working there. The warm, collaborative atmosphere I remembered had been replaced by a cold, competitive environment. I went to greet my new superior, Manager Amber Young. Taking a deep breath to calm my nerves, I knocked on her office door. Come in, a sharp voice called from inside. I entered to find a stern-looking woman who seemed to be in her early 30s, her eyes fixed on her computer screen. I'm returning to work today. I'm Susan Miller. It's nice to meet you, I said, bowing slightly. Manager Young finally looked up from her screen, her eyes sweeping over me dismissively. She sighed heavily, the sound filled with irritation.
So, you've come back. I guess at your age you couldn't find another job?
I couldn't believe my ears. Was this how new employees were greeted now? Excuse me, have I done something wrong? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Manager Young leaned back in her chair, her eyes cold.
Listen, the company doesn't need people like you anymore. You took what, 5 years off? And you think you can just come back like nothing happened?
I felt my face grow hot with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. I was on approved leave to care for my mother. I've been looking forward to returning to my work in product development. She scoffed.
Product development? You probably can't do anything useful anyway. Just do some odd jobs. You can at least make coffee, right?
I left her office in a daze, feeling as if I'd step into some bizarre alternate reality. This couldn't be happening, not after everything I'd accomplished here. But it was happening. From that day on, I was relegated to menial tasks: copying, data organization, making coffee, cleaning. It was as if my years of experience in successful product designs had never existed. Still, I carried out these tasks with a smile, hoping to eventually earn their recognition. I tried to stay positive, reminding myself of my mother's words. Take your time and do your best. But Manager Young was relentless in her criticism and dismissal of my efforts. One day, as I was distributing documents for a meeting, she stopped me at the door.
You don't need to attend the meetings. Your ideas are probably outdated anyway.
I tried to protest, but I've been working on some new concepts that I think could... She cut me off with a wave of her hand.
We don't have time for your old-fashioned ideas. Just leave the documents and go.
Another time, I was having a friendly chat with a younger colleague during our lunch break. We were discussing some of the projects I had worked on before my leave. Manager Young walked by and overheard us. She pulled me aside afterward, her voice low and threatening.
No chatting, okay? We don't want your stupidity rubbing off on everyone else.
I was stunned by her cruelty. I was just sharing some of my experiences.
Your experiences are irrelevant, she snapped. This company is moving forward, not backward. Remember your place.
It seemed she had made me her personal target for snide remarks and criticism. Every idea I proposed was shot down without consideration. Every task I completed was met with harsh criticism, no matter how well I performed it. I later learned that the company was now focusing on developing products for younger consumers. Whenever I tried to contribute, my age was used as an excuse to shut me out.
We're targeting millennials, Susan,
Manager Young would say with a condescending smile.
I don't think you quite understand what they want.
It was as if my years of experience in product development meant nothing. The innovative spirit that had once been celebrated was now dismissed as outdated and irrelevant. I tried to adapt, to learn about the new target market, but my efforts were consistently belittled or ignored. It was becoming increasingly clear that Manager Young, and by extension the company, had no interest in what I had to offer. The stress began to take its toll. I found myself dreading going to work each day, my stomach in knots as I entered the office. The joy I had once found in my job had been replaced by anxiety and self-doubt. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. I had promised my mother I would stay true to myself, and I was determined to keep that promise, no matter how difficult it became. Chapter 6. The Breaking Point. One day, I noticed water droplets on a drink and wiped them off with my handkerchief. This handkerchief was a gift from my mother, one of the last things she had given me before she passed away. It was a simple white handkerchief with delicate lace trim, but to me, it was priceless. Holding it made me feel like she was cheering me on, giving me strength. All right, let's do this, I said to myself, trying to boost my spirits. I tucked the handkerchief back into my pocket and turned to face another day. Just then, I heard a voice behind me.
Oh, that handkerchief is cute. Let me see it.
I turned to find Manager Young standing there, her eyes fixed on my pocket where I had just tucked away the handkerchief. "Oh, sure. Here you go," I said, hesitantly pulling it out and handing it to her. Maybe she's in a good mood today, I thought, hopefully. Manager Young took the handkerchief and walked briskly to her desk. I noticed a large coffee spill spreading across her desk surface. No way, I thought, hurrying over with paper towels. But I was too late. The handkerchief was callously dropped into the sea of coffee. Without hesitation, the manager used it to mop up the mess. I stood there, frozen in disbelief. My mother's gift, her memory, was being used like a common rag.
"Oh, how unusually thoughtful of you,"
she said with a smirk, taking the paper towels from my stunned hands and placing the coffee-soaked handkerchief back in them. It felt like my memories with my mother had been tarnished. The delicate lace was stained brown, the fabric heavy with the spilled coffee. Before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face.
"What's wrong with you?"
Manager Young sneered.
"It's just an old piece of cloth. Grow up."
I couldn't speak. I simply turned and ran to the kitchenette, desperately trying to wash the handkerchief clean. As I scrubbed at the stains, my tears mixing with the water in the sink, I knew I had reached my limit. The manager's behavior was beyond unreasonable. It wasn't just about the handkerchief. It was about respect, about basic human decency. And it was clear that in this new version of the company, these values no longer mattered. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. My mother's words echoed in my mind. "Promise me you'll always stay true to yourself. Don't let anyone dim your light." I had been patient. I had tried to adapt, but this was too much. With shaking hands, I dried the handkerchief as best as I could and carefully folded it. Then, with a determination I hadn't felt in months, I headed straight for the CEO's office. After knocking and hearing a "come in," I entered. The CEO, a man in his mid-40s, with slicked back hair and an expensive suit, looked up from his desk. I noticed a magazine hastily turned face down on the desk. From the glimpse I caught, it didn't look like any business publication I knew.
"Is something the matter?"
he asked, his tone suggesting he was already bored with whatever I might have to say. I wanted to discuss Manager Young's behavior, I began, fighting back tears. The CEO leaned back in his chair, a slight frown creasing his brow.
"Go on,"
he said, his voice neutral. Fighting back tears, I recounted what happened to the new CEO. I told him about the constant belittling, the dismissal of my ideas, and finally the incident with the handkerchief. As I spoke, I could see the CEO's expression changing. But it wasn't sympathy I saw. It was annoyance. When I finished, he sighed heavily.
"I'll look into it. Take a half day off and go home for now."
I did as I was told and went home, feeling a mixture of relief at being away from the office and anxiety about what would happen next. The next day when I arrived at work, I found Manager Young standing with her arms crossed, the CEO beside her. My heart sank. This didn't look good.
"I've heard the story,"
the CEO said, his voice cold. I felt a bit relieved. Maybe the manager's harassment would decrease now, but my hope was short-lived.
"I hear you voluntarily gave her your handkerchief saying, 'Please use this.' I understand the sentiment, but a handkerchief isn't enough to clean up spilled coffee, is it?"
The CEO spoke with a hint of exasperation, as if I was a child who had done something foolish.
"Right? Even when I asked her to bring paper towels, she just stood there. I had no choice but to use what she offered as a temporary measure."
Manager Young chimed in, her voice dripping with false innocence.
"That's not..."
I tried to protest, but the CEO cut me off with a raised hand.
Manager Young quickly got paper towels, preventing any damage to our equipment. And you come to me playing the victim? Do you have some grudge against her?
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had completely twisted the situation, making me out to be the problem. "Mr. CEO, please listen to me," I began, but once again I was interrupted.
"A high school graduate at that age. You must be desperate to keep your position by bringing others down. It's pathetic, really. I I don't understand why someone so useless and incompetent is still in this department at your age. What a waste of resources.
Manager Young sneered. Her words hit me like physical blows. I looked to the CEO, hoping he would see through her act, but his face remained impassive. Mr. CEO, please listen to me. I tried one last time, my voice barely above a whisper. The CEO interrupted me again, his voice filled with irritation. To come directly to me with such a trivial matter. I'm a busy man, you know. Well, Manager Young has a point. Why don't you seriously reconsider your position here? If you try hard enough, you might find another job. The CEO's words hit me like a ton of bricks. He was indirectly telling me to resign. After all I had done for this company, I no longer had a place here. The realization settled over me like a heavy blanket, suffocating my last bit of hope. I was too shocked to speak. Without a word, I turned and left the office, holding back my tears until I was out of sight. As I walked away, I heard the CEO say, "Well done, Amber."
Thanks, boss,
Manager Young replied, her voice sickeningly sweet.
How about we go out to celebrate? A toast to getting rid of that nuisance.
Their conversation drifted to me as I walked away, each word another nail in the coffin of my career here. Sadness and anger welled up inside me. To think they would go to such lengths to force me to resign. I had wanted to keep trying, to honor my mother's memory by persevering, but this was the last straw. There was no future for me in a company that treated its employees with such disrespect and cruelty. I called the HR department from a spot a little away from the company and expressed my intention to resign. They agreed to let me send my resignation letter by mail later. As I hung up the phone, a mix of emotions washed over me. Relief at no longer having to face daily humiliation. Sadness at leaving the job I had once loved. Anger at the injustice of it all. And underneath it all, a growing sense of uncertainty about my future. I never imagined I'd leave the company so abruptly. There were things I was curious about, projects I had hoped to see through to completion, but I didn't care anymore. This wasn't the company I had loved anyway. It had changed beyond recognition, and not for the better. As I walked home, my mind raced with thoughts of what I would do next. At my age, finding a new job wouldn't be easy. But then, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered, maybe you don't need to find a new job. Maybe it's time to create your own path. The seed of an idea began to form, one that would change the course of my life in ways I couldn't yet imagine. Chapter 7. The Aftermath and a New Beginning. The days following my abrupt departure from the company were a whirlwind of emotions. I fluctuated between relief at being free from the toxic environment and anxiety about my uncertain future. Tom was my rock during this tumultuous time, offering unwavering support and encouragement. The evening after I left the company, I sat at our kitchen table, staring blankly at the wall. Tom placed a steaming mug of tea in front of me and took a seat beside me.
Do you want to talk about it?
He asked gently. I took a deep breath and poured out everything that had happened. The constant belittling, the incident with the handkerchief, the final confrontation with the CEO and Manager Young. As I spoke, tears of frustration and anger rolled down my cheeks. Tom listened patiently, his face growing increasingly concerned and then angry as I recounted the events. When I finished, he reached out and took my hand. Susan, you did the right thing by quitting. A company that easily discards people like that? Do they have any idea how much you contributed? How could they treat you so horribly? I tried to calm him down, saying it was all in the past now, but his anger didn't subside. He stood up abruptly and went to our home office. I could hear him rummaging through drawers, muttering under his breath. When he returned, he was carrying a stack of papers. He laid them out on the table in front of me. My eyes widened as I recognized what they were. Patent certificates. And my name was listed as the patent holder on each one.
Do you remember these?
Tom asked, his voice softer now. I nodded, running my fingers over the embossed seals. Of course. Mr. Johnson, the previous CEO, insisted I file for patents on my designs. He said it was important to protect my work.
Exactly,
Tom said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips.
And do you know what these mean?
I looked at him, confusion evident on my face. They mean the designs are legally recognized as mine, but the company has the right to use them. What are you getting at, Tom? He sat down next to me again, his eyes shining with a mixture of excitement and determination.
Susan, these patents are yours, not the company's. Yours. Do you have any idea how many of the company's current products are based on your designs?
I thought about it for a moment. Well, quite a few, I suppose. My designs were always popular with consumers. Tom nodded emphatically.
More than quite a few. I did some research. The products based on your patents generate about 90% of the company's current sales.
I gasped, the implication of what he was saying slowly dawning on me. But that means...
It means they've been profiting from your work without giving you proper credit or compensation.
Tom finished for me.
And now they've pushed you out? No, we can't let them get away with this.
I felt a surge of anger, quickly followed by uncertainty. What can we do? They're a big company with expensive lawyers. We're just us. Tom squeezed my hand reassuringly.
We may be just us, but we have the law on our side. These patents give you leverage, Susan. We can file a patent infringement complaint.
I hesitated. The idea of taking on my former company was daunting. No, we can't do that. It would be too cruel. It's fine now. Let's just let it go quietly.
No way, Tom said firmly. I can't calm down. I won't let them get away with this. They should at least apologize. Besides,
his voice softened.
I want you to live doing what you love. Your mom in heaven would want that too.
At the mention of my mother, I felt tears welling up in my eyes again. I remembered her final words to me. Promise me you'll always stay true to yourself. Don't let anyone dim your light. I took a deep breath, feeling a new resolve building within me. You're right, Tom. We can't let them get away with this. Not just for me, but for anyone else they might treat the same way in the future. Tom smiled, pride shining in his eyes.
That's my girl. Now, let's start planning our next move.
Over the next few days, Tom and I worked tirelessly. We consulted with a patent lawyer, gathered all the necessary documentation, and prepared our case. It was exhausting work, but also exhilarating. For the first time since leaving the company, I felt like I was taking control of my life again. Finally, everything was ready. Tom filed a patent infringement complaint with the patent office. We knew it would take time for the complaint to be processed and for any action to be taken. What we didn't expect was the speed at which the company would react. A few months after we filed the complaint, I received a call from a number I recognized all too well. It was the company's main line. For a moment, I hesitated, my finger hovering over the answer button. Then, steeling myself, I accepted the call. Hello? I said, trying to keep my voice steady.
Hey, you! What's the meaning of this?
It was Manager Young's panicked voice. What do you mean? I asked, although I had a pretty good idea what this was about. My guess was confirmed by her next words.
We're getting tons of warning letters from the patent office? What did you do?
I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction at the panic in her voice. But I kept my tone neutral as I replied. I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. Perhaps you should consult with your legal department?
Don't play dumb with me,
she shrieked.
You're behind this, aren't you? How dare you? Pulling this kind of stunt, you ungrateful! Withdraw it immediately.
If she had at least approached me humbly, there might have been room for discussion. But her aggressive attitude only strengthened my resolve. I'm busy, so if you'll excuse me, I said calmly.
Wait! This is all your fault! The company is suffering because of you, and you barely did any work!
She sputtered. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even now, she was trying to belittle my contributions. Wasn't it Manager Young who prevented me from working? I asked pointedly.
Shut up! We're targeting young people with our product development. Your ideas would have been useless anyway. You should have been grateful we even let you make coffee.
I sighed. There's no talking sense to this person. As I said, I'm busy. Goodbye.
Wait, please!
She seemed about to say something, but I had nothing more to discuss. I ended the call feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. It was clear that the company hadn't learned anything from this experience. A while later, another call came in. This time, it was a CEO. I braced myself for another confrontation as I answered.
Mrs. Miller.
The CEO's voice was markedly different from the dismissive tone he had used in our last encounter.
Come back. There seems to have been some misunderstanding. Manager Young's behavior, that was a misunderstanding too. She's reflecting on her actions. We'll reconsider your position.
I almost laughed at the sudden change in his attitude. I'm sorry, but I'm too busy with our own company now to help yours. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then,
you've already found another job? But at your age, it must be a low-paying part-time position, right? Come back. I'll guarantee your salary and position. Or we could pay you for the patent usage. How much do you want?
Money, money. Is that all they can talk about? I was utterly disappointed but not surprised. I don't need your money, I said firmly. We've decided to keep the patents with our company.
Come on now. I'm trying to negotiate with you in your favor here. Are you trying to drive up the price? You're quite cunning, aren't you?
The CEO's suddenly cheerful voice grated on my nerves. I glanced at Tom, who had been listening to my side of the conversation with growing amusement. He gestured for me to hand over the phone. In that case, would you like to speak with our company CEO? This should be a discussion between companies now, I said, unable to keep a note of satisfaction out of my voice. I passed the phone to Tom, who took it with a grin.
Hello, this is the CEO speaking, said Tom. His voice was professional, but with an underlying tone of steel. You know, we were considering transferring the patents to your company.
I could hear the CEO's excited response even without the phone to my ear.
Oh, is that so? Well.
Tom's face hardened.
Yes, we were considering it. I was listening in on the call, but now I don't feel inclined to do so at all. Unlike my wife, I'm not so lenient. Let me explain, point by point, why we won't be transferring the patents.
What followed was a masterclass in controlled anger and professional takedown. Tom systematically went through every instance of mistreatment I had endured, every contribution I had made that had been dismissed or stolen, and every legal right we now held over the patents. The CEO on the other end, who had been responding with occasional grunts, gradually fell silent, eventually unable to reply at all.
Hello, are you still there?
Tom asked, his voice deceptively calm.
No response. I hope you understand how unfairly you treated my wife. Yes,
came a voice as quiet as a mosquito's buzz.
Please reflect on your actions thoroughly. Goodbye.
Tom hung up without waiting for a response. He turned to me, a mixture of satisfaction and concern on his face.
Sorry, I ended up hanging up.
I couldn't help but smile. It's okay. There's nothing more to say anyway. Thank you, Tom. You were amazing. He pulled me into a hug.
No one messes with my brilliant wife and gets away with it.
Perhaps due to Tom's logical scolding, we received no more calls after that. It seemed the company had finally realized the gravity of their situation. Chapter 8. A new chapter begins. From then on, I devoted myself to product development at Tom's company. It was a small startup he had been running on the side for years, focusing on innovative household products. Now, with my expertise in patents, we were ready to take it to the next level. I threw myself into the work with renewed passion. I invented numerous items from a housewife's perspective, things that would make life easier and more convenient. My years of experience, combined with the lessons I learned from my mother about resourcefulness and creativity, proved invaluable. One of our first big successes was a modular kitchen organizer system. It was inspired by the way my mother and I used to repurpose items to maximize our small living space. The product was a hit, especially with young families and apartment dwellers. Another popular item was a multifunctional cleaning tool that combined several implements into one sleek design. It was efficient, space-saving, and eco-friendly, all qualities that resonated with modern consumers. As we worked, I often thought of my mother. I could almost hear her voice saying, "See, Susan, your ideas aren't outdated at all. They're timeless because they solve real problems." The company's performance was steady, with sales reaching 10 times that of my previous company within the first year. We were small but agile, able to respond quickly to market trends and customer feedback. Meanwhile, news reached us about my former company's declining sales. They had tried launching products aimed at young people without any real innovation, but such unoriginal items were unlikely to be hits. Without the backbone of my patented designs, they were struggling to compete in the market. Rumor had it that they were on the verge of bankruptcy. While I didn't wish ill on anyone, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. It was proof that age didn't determine the value of ideas. Innovation and understanding customers' needs did. As our company grew, we started hiring more staff. We made sure to create a diverse team, valuing experience as much as youthful energy. I was determined to create the kind of supportive, collaborative environment I had once enjoyed under Mr. Johnson's leadership. One day, as Tom and I were reviewing job applications for a new product manager position, a familiar name caught my eye. "Tom," I said, my voice a mix of surprise and uncertainty. "Look at this." He leaned over to see what I was pointing at. His eyebrows shot up. "Is that?" I nodded. "Amber Young, my former manager." We found Manager Young's resume among the job applications. The employment history section stated that she had left her previous job voluntarily. She must have been cast aside just like I was, I mused. Tom's face darkened. "Serves her right. I hope you're not considering hiring her." I sat back conflicted. On one hand, Manager Young had treated me terribly. On the other hand, I knew firsthand how it felt to be discarded by a company you had dedicated yourself to. When they no longer need you or if you cause any trouble, they discard you immediately, I said softly. People aren't disposable pawns. Tom looked at me, his expression softening. "You're not seriously considering giving her a chance, are you?" I sighed. "I don't know, Tom. Part of me wants to reject her application outright, but another part of me wonders if this could be an opportunity for growth, for her and for us." "Growth?" Tom asked, skepticism clear in his voice. I nodded. "Yes, for her to learn from her mistakes and for us to show her that there's a better way to run a company. We could break the cycle of toxicity." Tom was quiet for a moment, considering my words. Finally, he said, "You have a bigger heart than I do, Susan, but it's your call. If you want to give her a chance, I'll support your decision." After much deliberation, I decided to at least give Amber a first-round interview. It wasn't a promise of employment, but it was a chance, more than she had given me. On the day of Amber's interview, I waited in front of the company building. When she came out, she spotted me and rushed over, her eyes wide with surprise. She still didn't know that I was the vice president of this company. However, it seemed she now fully understood my achievements at our previous workplace. The contemptuous look in her eyes had disappeared, replaced by something that looked like a mixture of shame and desperation.
"Mrs. Miller, what are you doing here?"
she exclaimed, bowing deeply. I noticed how different she looked from the confident, borderline arrogant manager I had known. Her suit was a little worn at the edges, and there were dark circles under her eyes.
"I've decided to start over from scratch,"
she said, her voice trembling slightly.
"Doing everything the CEO said didn't prevent me from being let go in the end. I don't know what to believe anymore. Looking back, I was just trying to protect myself. I'm truly sorry for what I did to you."
As she spoke, I could see the toll the past few months had taken on her. It turns out she had been struggling too. There were times when she felt her gender was a disadvantage in the corporate world. Even so, she had gritted her teeth and thrown herself into her work, climbing the corporate ladder one rung at a time. A career she had worked hard to build, gone in an instant. When she heard I was returning to work after my leave, she had panicked. She feared losing her position, the status she had fought so hard to achieve. Amber was now being honest with me, laying bare her insecurities and regrets. It was a far cry from the cold, dismissive manager I had known.
This is...
After apologizing, she took a small box out of her bag. She opened it and showed me the contents. Inside was a beautiful new handkerchief with white lace trim, remarkably similar to the one my mother had given me.
I've been hoping to give this to you someday,
she said, her voice barely above a whisper.
I tried to find one exactly like the handkerchief I borrowed that time, but I haven't been able to yet. I later heard that it was a precious memento from your late mother. What I did was unforgivable. I'm truly sorry.
I was touched by her gesture. She had been carrying this around, waiting for a chance to meet me, not knowing if or when that might happen. It's a beautiful handkerchief, I said softly. Are you sure I can have it?
Yes, please accept it,
she replied, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Thank you, I said sincerely, accepting the handkerchief from her. I had only expected to hear an apology, but her gesture touched my heart. It showed a level of reflection and remorse I hadn't anticipated. Good luck with your next interview, I said. Let's work together again. Amber's eyes widened in surprise.
Huh? How do you know?
I couldn't help but smile at her confusion. I'm the vice president of this company. My husband, the CEO, will be part of the final interview. He's strict, but he's a good person at heart. Unlike our former CEO, he's someone you can trust. We'll be waiting for you. The look of shock on Amber's face was almost comical. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again, seemingly at a loss for words. The rest depends on your effort, I continued. If you can interact with others genuinely and as equals, I'm sure we'll be able to understand each other. Amber nodded vigorously, a spark of hope lighting up her eyes.
I'll do my best. Thank you for this opportunity, Mrs. Miller. I promise I won't let you down.
As she turned to leave, I called out to her. Oh, and Amber, remember, in this company, we value people for their skills and ideas, not their age or background. Keep that in mind during your interview. She nodded again, a small smile playing on her lips.
I will. Thank you again, Mrs. Miller.
As I watched her walk away, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The anger and resentment I had been carrying since my dismissal from the old company seemed to dissipate. I couldn't explicitly ask Tom to hire her, but I decided I might casually mention to him that she might be a good person after all. People can change, given the right circumstances and motivations. And sometimes, the best way to teach a lesson is to lead by example. The heart that values people, that's what I learned from my mother. It feels good to be valued, and I want to value others too. There are people who truly care about you, and those who don't. I want to support those who genuinely care about me, and I want to cherish those people as I live my life. As I walked back into our company building, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We weren't just building a successful business. We were creating a workplace where people could grow, learn, and be valued for who they are. I touched the new handkerchief in my pocket, right next to the one my mother had given me. 2 reminders of important lessons. One of resilience and creativity from my mother, and one of the power of second chances and personal growth from Amber. With these thoughts in mind, I stepped into my office, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. After all, at 42, I was just getting started on my new adventure as an entrepreneur, and I couldn't wait to see where this journey would take me next. Epilogue. 5 years later. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city as I stood at the window of my office. So much had changed in the 5 years since that fateful day when I left my old company. Our business had grown beyond our wildest dreams. What started as a small startup run by Tom and me had blossomed into a respected industry leader. Our products, born from a combination of innovation and practical experience, had found a loyal customer base across all age groups. I heard a knock at the door and turned to see Amber entering with a stack of papers.
"Here are the final designs for the new eco-friendly kitchen line, Mrs. Miller,"
she said, placing the documents on my desk.
"The team is really excited about this one."
I smiled, remembering how far we'd come. Amber had indeed earned her place in our company. After a rigorous interview process and the probationary period, she had proven herself to be a valuable asset. Her experience, combined with the humility she had gained from her setbacks, made her an excellent manager. Fair, considerate, and innovative. "Thank you, Amber," I said, picking up the top sheet. "And please, I've told you 100 times, call me Susan." She chuckled.
"Old habits die hard, I guess. But I'll try. Susan."
As she turned to leave, I called out to her. "Oh, Amber, don't forget about the mentoring session tomorrow. The new interns are looking forward to hearing about your experiences." She nodded, a warm smile on her face.
"I won't forget. It's become one of my favorite parts of the job, actually, helping the younger employees navigate their careers. It feels like I'm making up for my past mistakes in a way."
After she left, I sat down at my desk, marveling at how things had turned out. Our company had become known not just for its products, but for its workplace culture. We'd created an environment where experience was valued, innovation was encouraged, and everyone, regardless of age or background, had a voice. The phone on my desk rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Tom.
"Hey, Susan,"
he said, his voice warm.
"Just wanted to remind you about dinner tonight. Mom's excited to see us."
I glanced at the clock, realizing how late it had gotten. "Thanks for the reminder. I'll wrap up here and meet you at home." As I gathered my things to leave, my eyes fell on the 2 framed handkerchiefs hanging on my office wall, my mother's and Amber's. They served as daily reminders of the lessons I'd learned: resilience, creativity, and the power of second chances, and the importance of valuing people. Walking out of the office, I said goodnight to the few employees still working late. Their friendly waves and genuine smiles warmed my heart. This was more than a workplace. It was a community we had built together. As I stepped out into the cool evening air, I couldn't help but think about how different my life was now compared to 5 years ago. Back then, I had felt discarded, useless, my years of experience dismissed as outdated. Now, at 57, I was at the helm of a thriving company, respected in my field, and surrounded by people who valued what I had to offer. More importantly, I was doing work I loved, creating products that made people's lives easier and better. I thought about my mother, wondering what she would say if she could see me now. I could almost hear her voice.
"See, Susan, I told you to stay true to yourself. Your light is shining brighter than ever."
As I walked to my car, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the challenges that had led me here, for the people who had supported me along the way, and for the opportunity to create a workplace where others could shine too. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new ideas to explore, new problems to solve, but I was ready for them all. After all, age really is just a number, and in my case, 57 was proving to be a pretty great number indeed. With a smile on my face and a spring in my step, I headed home, looking forward to dinner with Tom and his mother, and to whatever adventures the future might hold. My story wasn't over yet. In many ways, it felt like it was just beginning.